Chapter 9. Even after the bell, David stayed slumped down in his seat, looking as if the air had somehow been squeezed out from his body. Everyone else except for Efren had hurried out, including Mr. Garrett, who'd excused himself for a quick bathroom break. Efren walked over and patted David on the shoulder. "Hey, you all right?" David sighed, letting out a deep breath. "Yeah, I guess. I just wasn't expecting to be put on the spot like that." He ran his fingers through his hair. Jennifer really killed it. Sounded like a real pro. "She is pretty smart, super hardworking too." David gave Efren a look. Efren answered with a shrug. "What? I'm just telling it like it is." David's head plopped against his desk. "Man, I didn't know elections were this much work. Maybe Mr. Garrett's right. I might not be cut out for this sort of thing." Mr. Garrett never said that. Didn't have to. It's pretty obvious who he's rooting for. There was no arguing that point. Maybe, but that's only because he doesn't know you like I do. That's why I think we need to rebrand you, show the entire school how presidential you can be. David's body sprang back up. So did his smile. "You're right. I can't just count on my popularity. I've got to focus on the issues and keep the campaign clean, like a baby's butt." Efren crunched his forehead. "I'm not so sure baby butts are all that clean." "Of course they are, otherwise they'd get all rashy." Now re-energized, David flung his backpack over his shoulder and gestured toward the door. "Come on, we've got an election to win. Miss Sala says we need a short presentation for next week's morning announcements. I'm thinking of filming a campaign video. You can be in it too if you want." Efren took a deep breath, bracing himself for one of David's crazy plans. "Our video needs to be funny but deep," David said, "without sundering my opponent." "I think you mean slandering, like politicians do on TV ads," Efren said, walking toward the door. "Yeah, none of that." None of that. It was music to Efren's ears. Was David finally taking things more seriously? Had Efren been wrong? Maybe there was nothing to actually worry about. "When I win," David added, jamming his thumb into his chest, "I want to know it was because the best man won. That's why my presentation's going to be a music video, and not just any video," he said, "a rap video." Efren squeezed his face with the palm of his hand. Immediately, his music replayed part of his talk with Jennifer, especially the part when she hugged him. Had the election been that day, Efren might have voted for her instead, and this was not okay with Efren. No colluding with the enemy. He had to stay loyal to David at all costs. Maybe David just needed a little motivation to act more like Jennifer. "As your campaign manager," Efren said, "it's my job to advise you, tell you things you might not want to hear. Things like, I'm not sure this rap video is a good idea." David stopped under the classroom doorway with a blank stare. "Good point. Anyone can make a rap video. See, that's why I pay you the big bucks." He raised a hand up high in the air, setting up for a high five. "So I'm going to freestyle." David lifted his arm and, with a forced smile, slapped David's hand. He may have been smiling on the outside, but he was definitely wincing inside. David reached for the door and shut it behind him before breaking out into a rhythm down the hall. "Hold up and take a listen. I'm running for ASB president, and yes, I glisten. I will make it happen. I have a plan. For a better school, I am your man. Everyone knows I am the GOAT. So get out today, get out and vote." Efren's mind struggled for just the right thing to say. "I can't picture anybody doing what you just did." David's smile was wily. "I know, right?" David's extra bounce lasted all day. It even made him pedal extra hard while giving Efren a ride home on the handlebars of his bike. David made it a point to sway around the many potholes on the road, but occasionally stood up and leaned forward for an added burst of speed. This made the road feel bumpier, but Efren didn't mind. Knowing he'd make it on time to pick up the twins made the pain worth it. David greeted anyone and everyone they passed, even the shirtless old guy who liked to read the newspaper from his porch while rubbing his hairy belly. Efren gripped the handlebar cushion and clung on for dear life, all while trying to act as cool as possible. "Are you sure your grandma won't mind having the little traviesos over?" "You kidding? She loves babying people, especially pint-sized twins with adorable cheeks. I'm telling you, the trick's going to be getting them back from her. Even with her arthritis, we might have to pry them from her hands." Efren shook his head and cringed. "Don't know what's worse, your jokes or these potholes." "Ha ha," David said, purposely hitting a dip on the road. Good thing for Efren's butt that Pio Pico Elementary was just around the corner. When they got to the school, the sidewalk was filled with moms pushing fancy second-hand strollers, chatting, exchanging the latest neighborhood chisme. Efren tried keeping his head down. The neighborhood was full of chismosos, and the last thing he wanted was anyone talking about him or Ama. Fortunately, the foot traffic didn't slow David in the least. In fact, it just seemed to encourage him to speed up. "Hold on, F-Man. What do you think I'm doing?" Except for one close call, El Periquito Blanco stood up on his bike and successfully zigzagged his way around everyone, finally reaching the playground. "See, told you we'd make it before the bell." Efren leaped off the bike, pulling the wedgie out of his butt. "I'm thinking about taking the bus next time." David leaned his bike beside the outdoor lunch tables. "It's not about the ride, it's the company that matters." "I don't know, tons of really nice old people ride the bus." Efren took a seat beside David. "It's weird coming back here, huh? Dude, I still have nightmares about this place." Efren laughed and then pointed to a dirt patch separating the lunch and play area. "You remember the marble game when we played Rigoberto and Rodrigo and pretended like we didn't know how to play? Hey, they're the ones who insisted on playing for keeps. They were trying to con us. I can't believe we won so many marbles. Remember when the bell rang and your shorts fell down as you started running to the line? Yep, the weight from the marbles made my shorts drop down to my ankles. I tripped and all the marbles came flying out of my pockets." David snort laughed. "Man, we caused such a mess. Every kid out in recess came running over. It was a total marble free-for-all." Efren leaned back laughing. There was so much screaming, the teachers came out from the lounge trying to figure out what was going on. "That was embarrassing," David shook his head, sighing deeply. "That's the same day I switched over to boxer shorts, just in case." It doesn't matter if everyone laughed. You were little. Excuse me. You didn't laugh. In fact, you never do." With bleary eyes, David held out his hand. Efren couldn't believe he'd ever considered voting for Jennifer. He extended his hand and the two dapped in perfect sync, with Efren easing up at the end, letting David get the thumb pin war pin. No matter how much Efren respected Jennifer, there was no way he was going to betray David. No way. Now, if only he could tell him about what was going on with Ama. The walk to David's house went smoothly, especially now that Max and Mia were once again talking to Efren. They couldn't wait to meet David's grandma, especially after he told them that she always kept a freezer full of ice cream, which was true. The only thing not true was the reason for the visit. Efren told David Ama had changed her work hours. David's house was small and simple, but it had a big yard. Actually, it had an enormous yard. It had to be, considering the size of the huge oak tree that towered in it. This broccoli-shaped giant was the most amazing tree Efren had ever seen in person. Efren and David often talked about building a tree house right smack in the middle. David wanted to have both Wi-Fi and a microwave so they could stream movies and eat popcorn. He also insisted that it have no ladder, just a climbing rope designed to keep all wimps out, especially girls. David even drew up blueprints and posted them over his bed, waiting for his dad's help to make it happen. But that was just an empty promise, like the one he'd made about visiting often. In the meantime, the tree was pretty fun as it was. So was the knee-high grass that allowed them to hide during their infamous walnut battles with the other kids on the block. The games there might have been painful, but they were equally fun. "Max, Mia, you guys better be on your best behavior. David's grandma is going to be watching you, but she's got a bad hip and can't chase after you, okay?" Both Max and Mia hooked pinkies and promised. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny soccer keychain with the LA Galaxy team logo just about smeared off it. The second he opened the front door, his little kitten, Oreo, came running over. Max's eyes sprang wide open. "Un gatito," he said, barging forward with both arms extended in front of him. Fortunately for Oreo, Efren managed to pull him back by the shirt. "No, you don't. You're going to scare her." Efren bent down until he was eye level with Max. "You wouldn't want to scare the kitten, would you?" Max shook his head. "Don't worry, gatitos love me." David scooped up the squealing kitten and cuddled her in the fold of his arm. "She likes it when you scratch her." Efren took a step back. "Not me, I'm allergic, remember?" Max and Mia began raking their fingers along her back, making Oreo purr. Just then David's grandma came into the living room. Her cane didn't seem to slow her down much. "These two precious little ones must be Max and Mia. Hello, Miss Deegan." Efren said, "Thank you so much for agreeing to watch them while David and I work on the campaign." She smiled. "Hi, Efren," but it was obvious that her attention was already on the twins. She came up to Max first and squeezed his chubby cheeks like most people did who met him for the first time. Max didn't mind. His cheeks were used to getting pinched. Mia, not so much. She immediately covered her cheeks with her hands, making Miss Deegan laugh. You two, she turned to David. Go work on that project. I'll watch these adorable children. David gave her a peck on the cheek and then lowered Oreo onto the floor. Thank you, Grandma. With that, the boys headed to David's room. The hallway walls were almost completely covered with picture frames, mostly of David back when he was little, back before his parents separated, back before his mother began to drink a lot and David's grandma had to take him in. Efren pointed at a photo of David being bathed in the kitchen sink. Man, you were chubbier than Max. Look at those arms. David laughed. I know, right? I keep telling Grandma that must be some other adorable-looking kid. He reached for the door to his room, sprouting a huge grin. Wait till you see my new toy. New toy? Knowing David, a new toy could be anything. A new slingshot, a new skateboard, maybe even new jewelry. Let me guess, you got a new... Efren's jaw dropped as he entered the room. In the corner on David's desk sat a new iPhone. Efren rushed to pick it up, his entire face gleaming. Oh my gosh, when did you get this? Yesterday, my mom sent it to me. Said this way we could FaceTime with each other anytime we want. Maybe my dad will get one too. David's eyes welled up just a bit. But I was thinking we could use it to film the campaign video. I've got the perfect thing to wear too. He rushed over to his closet and pulled out a white dress shirt and tie. Grandma bought me this for... He paused, embarrassed. For Sunday school. She says it'll keep me from getting possessed like Mom. How is she doing? Efren asked. Better, David said, slipping into the dress shirt and snapping on the clip-on tie. She just got a new job and is taking classes at the community college. I think she'll make it this time. This wasn't the first time Efren had heard David talk like this. He liked seeing David happy and filled with hope, but hated seeing him hurt each time his mom relapsed and started drinking again. Nevertheless, he smiled and nodded. Of course she will. David took a deep breath before he reached for his phone, entered his password, and handed it back to Efren. Where should we film? Efren looked around the room, only now noticing how tidy everything was. You even cleaned your room. Last time I was here, I accidentally sat on a pile of dirty socks and underwear. That's not true, David said, grinning. The socks weren't dirty. Nasty, Efren said. He held up the phone and pointed at the desk. I think this desk makes you look presidential. What do you think? Undoubtedly, said David. See, the clothes are making me sound smarter, too. Efren focused the camera directly at him. All right, Mr. Smarty Pants, Smarty Shirt. Why don't you tell us about your presidential platform? My what? Why don't you tell us about all the amazing things you are planning to do as president? David looked at the ceiling. I don't know. How about getting rid of homework? Efren put the camera down. You know you can't really do that, right? I don't know, David said, shifting his butt at the edge of his chair. What does a president even do? Efren shook his head. Maybe you should have paid less attention to the conchas Miss Salas brought and more attention to the ASB candidate meeting. David glared at Efren and then down at the ground. It's not that big a deal. I'll put together the biggest school party ever and everyone will be happy. Besides, if I win, I'll have Jennifer as vice president. You know she's going to be full of suggestions. I can just follow her lead. Efren sighed. Dude, then why are we voting for you? Immediately, Efren regretted his words, but it was too late. The room felt suddenly hotter. You don't think I can do this, do you? No, it's not like that. David's nostrils flared. This whole neighborhood thinks I'm just some goofy gringo to laugh at. David's voice began to break. Being president is my chance to prove everyone wrong. Efren's mind raced for a response. I guess the joke's on me, huh? David continued. Actually, he said, correcting himself, I am the joke. Mr. Garrett made that perfectly clear in class. You're not a joke, David. Oh, please, David scoffed. El Periquito Blanco? That's what kids call me. They don't even bother to do it behind my back. They think I'm too stupid to understand them making fun of my white skin and big nose. It's just a joke. They're just messing with you. No big deal. David shook his head like there was nothing more to say. Efren wanted to fix this. Wanted to tell him all about Jennifer, about her parents being undocumented, about her wanting to make a real difference at school. But that was a secret. He couldn't repeat that. He thought again about why he hadn't told David about Amabi having been deported. They'd known each other for so many years, shared so much, like countless jarritos sodas. Telling David about Ama would make a huge difference. He'd have to understand. My Ama got deported. 4 simple words, that was it. And yet the words carried so much hurt they seemed to swell and get lodged in his throat. Efren drew a deep breath. Finally he spoke. Only something totally different came out. I'd better go. Maxie and Mia must be driving your grandmother crazy. He gently tossed David's phone onto the bed. Fine, answered David. Don't worry about the video. I can do it myself. I know you can. Efren left the door open just in case David called him back, but he never did. That night, after eventually getting the twins to bed, Efren headed back to the bathtub, this time with pillow and blanket in tow. He opened the library copy of The House on Mango Street, turned to the page where he'd left off and tried reading, but his mind shifted to David. He never meant to hurt his friend's feelings. It wasn't that Efren didn't trust him with the family's secret. Actually, it was the exact opposite. Efren knew David would go home and tell his grandma. He knew they'd bring over cooked meals and probably offer him some money. That was the problem. David knew just about everything about Efren, knew about his family living in a tiny studio apartment, knew about their sleeping on mattresses on the floor, knew about Efren's second-hand clothes and toys, and yet David had never pitied him. Efren wanted to keep it that way. Efren stared at the drip coming from the faucet and thought about the old story he'd heard about a Dutch boy who'd saved a village by plugging a hole in the dam with his thumb. Eventually, he pulled off his sock with his other foot and stuck his big toe inside the faucet. He might not be a hero like that boy, but he could at least try to make things right between him and David. He had to. First Aman, now this. Efren closed the book and blessed himself with the sign of the cross. Diosito, it's me. I know that you've been busy looking out for Ama and helping us to get her back. But if you could you help me patch up things with David too? He's my best friend, and I kind of need one right now. Gracias. Efren leaned back against his pillow. His eyelids became unbearably heavy, and even with the brightest light shining above, he couldn't fight off the sleep.